it's a money fight, I get you, and you want to make money. But at some point in time, if you keep telling us that you're taking boxing seriously and you want to be recognized as a big-time boxer / fighter, you're going to have to fight somebody closer to your age, who is a contender at the very least.
Jake Paul fight announcement, another circus act, another clown show. A fight between Jake Paul and Gervonta Tank Davis has been announced as an exhibition fight.
The fight that I couldn't believe, that was too insane and honestly just baffling to think would be a real fight in 2025, reminds you that combat sports are the craziest sports on.
Stephen A. Smith didn't hold back when reacting to the announcement of Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis. He called it nothing less than a circus. Smith admitted that Jake is great at promoting himself and turning fights into big shows, but stressed that boxing deserves more respect. In his view, Jake should face opponents that actually make sense rather than chasing shock value. To Smith, this fight shows that entertainment is being prioritized over real competition.
I've always been a fan of Jake because I think that what Jake tries to do for the sport of boxing, I think people don't realize the importance of him being able to promote for himself and not being reliant on the promoters who I believe has held the sport hostage. The only critique I've ever given Jake, I just want Jake to fight boxers. Like Nate Diaz, we know his reputation. We know the man can fight. We know in the octagon he could be something special. But we know you breathe on him, he starts bleeding.
It's a fair critique. And you know what? He should fight boxers. But then again, should he? Because I'll tell you why. If you're a human who can rake in $6 to $10 million fighting people that you know you're going to beat, and you want to build a resume and a record that's impressive with a good highlight reel, you got to be strategic about this shit. Jake's 25, 26. He's got so much time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I get where you coming from. All I'm saying is, we don't know your skill set because you haven't been in there with anybody really skilled.
Boxing analysts echoed that same concern, saying Jake Paul's latest fight is just another spectacle in his career. They argued that most of Jake's matchups lack logic or competitive balance. These fights seem designed more for attention than sporting credibility. Instead of testing himself against opponents who match him in weight or style, Jake continues picking unusual fights. For many experts, this turns his bouts into entertaining events, but not serious contests.
Won the fight. But yeah, that was that. This time, Jake Paul is to take on Tank Davis. Tank Davis, he was recently in the news for being arrested for a domestic violence incident involving one of his kids' mother. He was alleged to have slapped her about the place. The charges were later dropped, to be fair to him. But yeah, that was when he was last in the news. What is interesting is just a couple of months ago, Tank Davis was saying openly that he'd lost his passion for boxing and that he wanted time away from the sport. There was speculation that he might even retire, as he was experiencing extreme mental fatigue from boxing, depression, and there were mental health concerns over him. However, I guess the opportunity to earn a truck full of money, fighting a completely worthless exhibition fight against Jake Paul, was enough to make him change his mind about boxing. Funny that, isn't it? But you know what? I'm not even going to waste your time or mine critiquing this utter nonsense. Suffice to say that this so-called fight we're talking about is an exhibition, and it pits Jake Paul, who is a cruiserweight, by the way, weighs in excess of 200 pounds, and Tank Davis, who is, he was the WBA lightweight champion, who weighs in at about 135 pounds when he fights. So that's a disparity of some 65 pounds. In old money, that's about 4.5 stone. There's also a significant difference in height. Jake Paul is roughly 6'1", 2. Gervonta Davis is 5'5" at best. So, there's a height disparity.
Ring Magazine broke the shocking news on Twitter, and it immediately set the boxing world buzzing. Jake Paul will face Gervonta Tank Davis on November 14th at State Farm Arena in Atlanta. The exhibition fight will stream live on Netflix, as confirmed by journalist Mike Carpenter. Talks for Jake to fight Anthony Joshua reportedly fell apart over network disagreements. Jake's last fight was at 200 pounds, while Davis is a world champion at 135 pounds. The drastic size difference has fans debating whether this is a mismatch or just another stunt for entertainment value. Jake Paul has been pushing his own agenda in boxing, investing his own money, and creating buzz to make his wild goals a reality. Whether people love or hate it, he has managed to shake up the sport in ways few imagined. While many dismiss his methods as unorthodox, others believe his financial power brings attention and fresh audiences into boxing. This unexpected matchup, one that nobody thought would ever happen, proves how far Jake is willing to go.
Kind of bounce in between doing these entertainment fights and then, trying to push toward his goal of ingraining himself in the sport of boxing, and kind of does both of them. So it's kind of a weird place to be, because he wants the respect of the boxing fans and the boxing hierarchy and hardcore boxing people, but at the same time, he'll gain some of that and then lose some of it. It's like a seesaw of his fights. Like one fight, like, okay, that's a real fight, or that's a real fight. And he'll go and he'll win the fight. Julio Cesar Chavez, real fighter, maybe past his prime, whatever, but Jake goes and wins that fight pretty easily, and then gets a lot of respect, gets a lot of the boxing hardcore love. And you have these talks about him fighting Anthony Joshua, and that was going to get even more respect. More people were like, that's fucking crazy. What are you doing? Myself included. That seemed like a massive risk, but a lot of people were like, okay, fair play. Anthony Joshua, that's a real heavyweight. Jake wants to fight him. He's a psycho, but fair play. And then you announce this one, and it's like, well, that's the same thing people have been saying about Jake for years, so it's a weird spot to be in for him for sure. But I talked about this not being the first choice, and I don't think it was, because Coppinger reports next that talks for Jake Paul to face Anthony Joshua collapsed over network issues. Now, we had all heard the talks, and they were pretty public, from Eddie Hearn, from Jake. Nakisa Badarian, Jake's manager, was over in the UK on, I think, Sky Sports, talking about the fight and saying how it was a real possibility and they were really starting to work on it. And now Mike Coppinger says that the talks for Jake and Joshua fell apart over broadcast.
Paul later confirmed the fight on Instagram, writing, "Size versus speed. Power versus precision. One will rise, one will fall." Live worldwide from Atlanta, only on Netflix, Friday, November 14th. His post fueled even more excitement, making the exhibition a global talking point. Boxing veteran Teddy Atlas also weighed in. He acknowledged that, love him or hate him, Jake Paul deserves credit for carving out a unique space in the sport. According to Atlas, this didn't happen by accident. It took persistence, investment, and a willingness to risk stability for the spotlight. Paul has trained seriously for years, worked with top coaches, and sparred with professionals. Atlas noted that while purists mock him, Jake has shown real improvement. Many fans still dismiss him because of his YouTube background, but Atlas believes Jake's journey shows how much effort and sacrifice he's put into reaching this point.
Credit to Paul. Why? He's done a hell of a job to put himself in this position. He sold himself. He sold his dream. He took his dream. He took his idea. And he put it out there, and he made it happen. Give him credit for that. And he made it happen. And he took risk along the way. Yeah, he picked his spots. He's in the driver's seat. He gets to pick his spots. He's the one bringing the money. He's the one promoting. Yeah, he's the name. He made himself that, coming from where he came from, with all his followers and the whole thing, and just the uniqueness of what he was doing. But he has learned along the way. He's not a top guy yet. No, I don't know that he ever will be. He didn't have that amateur background and the things that you usually need to be a top guy. But he has improved. He is a work in progress. He is a guy that you got to give him credit that he's respected the sport. He went out there, he's worked hard at it, and he's gotten himself into this position. Having said all of that, this might be a step too far. Now, when I say it, I'm also, I try to be responsible. I've been in this game 50 years, so I know where not to step, where you could twist an ankle, or worse, you could break a leg or fall down. When I say that,
team at Talk Sport gave a harsh reaction to the matchup, calling it completely unbalanced. Their biggest concern is the weight gap. Davis is a natural 135 pounds lightweight who has dominated his division with knockout power. Paul, on the other hand, usually walks around at 195 pounds. To them, this makes the fight unrealistic and unfair. This is part of a recurring criticism against Jake Paul. Many argue that he chooses opponents who are either much smaller, past their prime, or from outside the sport of boxing. In this case, Davis may be at the peak of his career, but the size difference is huge.
Where the problem was. So I think that fight is sort of like dead and buried in the water. And we get Gervonta Davis, man, like you guys said it. He's a 135-pound world champion, lightweight world champion. The guy's my height. He's 5'5". And Jake Paul is a cruiserweight. You know, he walks around at sort of like 15 stone. So, and it's an exhibition. So look, if you buy into that, then yeah, fine. But it's not one for me.
Spence, let me ask you this: if you were European champion, right?
Yes.
Before you had to retire, Sally, you were European champion. If you were, how tall are you? What are you at? 4'8", 4'9"?
5'5".
5'5". Okay. If you were in your pomp at European champion and you were 5'5" and you were fighting Jake Paul, would you fancy your chances?
Absolutely. I think, yeah, definitely. I think I fancy my chances. I think Gervonta Davis actually beats him as well. He's one of the pound-for-pound best fighters in the world at lightweight. But it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? It's like you got a guy of 5'5" boxing a guy of 6 foot plus. Cruiserweight. Yeah, it's just all a little bit odd. I feel if they're going to do an exhibition, perhaps Jake should have picked someone more his size. Look, his last fight against Julio Chavez Jr. Was at cruiserweight. Chavez Jr. was a former world champion at middleweight himself, and that sort of made sense. And it was a good win for Jake Paul. You know, he come out there and he beats an ex-world champion. He gets a little bit of credibility, and you go, right, now you're heading in the right direction.
Said boxing scene added that this fight is not a win-win situation for Gervonta Davis. Despite being smaller, Davis is undefeated and known for his knockout power. But facing someone much bigger creates risk on both sides. If Davis loses, critics will say it was because of the size difference. If he wins, some will still argue Jake Paul wasn't an elite boxer to begin with, which could undermine the victory.
Win-win for Gervonta as much as it is for Jake. Jake, it's like, okay, you're fighting a former world lightweight champion. You're bigger, so you have some advantages, even if you're, at a severe skill disadvantage. You're not supposed to expect to do anything, but if you do, it's even, it's bananas for you. It's great. Gervonta, I don't know. What if Jake hits him? Jake's a big guy. I don't know if Gervonta stood next to Jake. Jake's a big guy.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
And Gervonta is small even by lightweight standards.
Right.
So it is a little bit of a David and Goliath fight. It's just the David character in Gervonta is much more skilled. But I guess that's the thought process. As far as what it does for boxing, well, absolutely nothing. But then again, what have Gervonta Davis and Jake Paul really done for boxing in the ring aspect? Because Jake, I am a believer in Jake as a promoter, and I think that he has a future as a promoter, and I think he's done very well as a promoter, and I think his company has done some very good things for the sport, and for young fighters, and for brewing talent and making good fights on that basis. But as far as from fighters' perspective, what they do for boxing from a fighter's perspective, I don't think Gervonta Davis has ever done anything for boxing, honestly. Like I feel like TV has just in this generation, they just create stars, and then they just tell you, okay, we're gonna make this guy the star. It's like they're pre-created.